Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this NRCoP webinar on From Cairns to Margaret River and everywhere in between, regulating in the regions. We have participants from all over the world at this webinar, so I would like to begin by acknowledging First Peoples from all our countries and pay my respect to them. We honour their wisdom and their stewardship of traditional lands, waters and customs which enrich us all. I am Marian Prete, the Director, Regional and Remote Early Childhood Programs, Early Childhood Education and Care from Queensland's Department of Education. I'm based in Atherton in Far North Queensland. Before I introduce our speakers, a few points about our webinars. All the webinars are recorded and will be made available on the NRCoP YouTube channel within 14 days. We'll be using the Q&A function for questions, and I do encourage you to do this. We will be leaving a good chunk of time at the end of each of our speakers to discuss these questions as a panel. If you like the look of another question, you can upvote that question. We will attempt to get to as many of your questions as we can during the Q&A session. Our presenters have generously agreed to answer in writing a selection of the questions that we don't get to during the session. This resource will be added to the webinar recording and will also be available on the NRCoP website. Now it's my privilege to introduce our panellists for today, in the order that they will be speaking. Firstly, we have Shelley Tofilau, Regional Manager, Northern Region, Office of Liquor and Gaming Regulation, Queensland Department of Justice and Attorney General. Starting her career in local laws with local government, Shelley then joined the Queensland Government in 1997 as a compliance officer with the Liquor Licensing Division in the Mount Isa Regional Office. Over the years, she moved across a range of positions within the Queensland Office of Liquor and Gaming Regulation, known as OLGR, progressing to senior roles of Principal Investigator and Manager Compliance within the Investigations branch. More recently, Shelley transferred from the OLGR's head office in Brisbane to take up a role in Far North Queensland as the Regional Manager, which allows her to connect with the communities, consider local issues, and to deliver services directly through a number of teams she manages across Cairns and Rockhampton. Matt Cuthbert, Manager, Planning and Regulatory Services, Shire of Augusta, Margaret River. Matt is a town planner with over 20 years' experience working for state and local governments, which is something he never thought he'd ever write. He currently manages the Planning and Regulatory Services Unit at the Shire of Augusta, Margaret River, which makes him someone that people in the community are always pleased to see. He is passionate about retaining the character and natural beauty of the southwest landscape, which is a biodiversity and tourist hotspot. When not at work, he sneaks off to his property in the neighbouring Shire, where he enjoys peaceful solitude and chainsawing. Thirdly, Iain Dainty, we're hoping will be able to join us. Iain, and this is obviously one of those things which comes with working in regional and remote areas. Looks like Iain may have had some problems connecting to this afternoon's webinar, but I'm going to introduce Iain to you, and we hope very much that he'll be able to join us during the webinar. So Iain is Director, WorkSafe Industrial and Regional, West Australian Department of Mines, Industry Regulation and Safety. Iain comes from a strong safety regulatory background and is the Director of Industrial and Regional Industries Directorate with WorkSafe in Western Australia. He also has significant regulatory and compliance experience in explosives and dangerous goods management, having more than 25 years' experience in the business. As a regulator, his focus is on safety management and holding people accountable for their commitments to that safety. He manages 3 teams that believe in educating and informing, a carrot rather than stick approach. He is not afraid of change or implementing change and struggles with the concept that we only do things in a particular way simply because that's the way we have always done it. Welcome to our panellists. What a wonderful lineup. And so you are all aware in advance, all slides will be available on the NRCoP website with the YouTube recording and other resources from today. Now we'll begin, and you may have noticed that today's panelists have a screen background with a photo showing their area. We're going to ask our panelists to share with you a little about that area and how that place has an impact on the work they do. Let's begin with Shelley.
Thank you, Marian. Well, first of all, I want to thank you for the invitation today. I'm actually really excited to be here and, give a bit of an overview on what we do in our region. So I'd start by saying I'm extremely fortunate that not only do I work for a skilled and modern regulator in the liquor and gambling industries across Queensland, where there are about 9,000 liquor and gaming licenses and 4 casinos, I get to experience living and regulating from a region with great teams and support behind me. As you'll see from my background, which depicts Queensland, I've referenced the vast landscape, which is in excess of 700,000 square kilometres that our team covers in both the central and northern region, with about 1,400 licensed premises, including one located in Cairns. So from Cairns, I actually manage a small experienced team that is based in our Rockhampton office, which encompasses the central region. I'm sure you can appreciate from seeing the mapping and gauging from the extreme distances in that mapping that most of the travel in this region can take anywhere between 5 and 8 days and is up to 3,500 kilometres per trip. So the office plans for 2 remote visits and 3 to 4 regional visits per year to licensed premises to conduct liquor and gaming compliance activities across that region. In terms of the northern region, what you see in front of you, it consists of an experienced and skilled team in the Cairns Liquor Office and in the Gaming Inspectorate, which is based within the casino. This region is another of significant geographical diversity where multicultural community needs are to be considered, and is of similar distances, which include up to the Cape York Peninsula and Torres Strait Islands. So finally, the teams I work with have a diverse range of strengths, skills and experience with a clear direction and understanding of how each of their roles contribute to the strategic plan, and that as a regulator. So getting out and about in our communities and making a difference to ensure safer environments, implementing initiatives and compliance strategies that minimise harm associated with the sale and consumption of liquor and gaming activities bring about the greatest satisfaction to our team.
Thank you, Shelley. That was a really great insight into the work that your team does and where you are. Matt, your turn.
Thank you, and welcome everyone to Dainty in Pibbleman country. A little bit about our Shire. We're a Shire located in the southwest of Western Australia, have a population of about 17,000 people and a size of about 2,200 square kilometres. Where I'm sitting today is in the town of Margaret River, which is the main town in our Shire, population of about 8,000. And then our other sort of smaller towns and villages, which you find both north and south of here, are sort of dotted along the highway. West of here is our major landform, which is the Lewin Naturalist Ridge. So that runs north to south from Cape Lewin in Cape Naturalist in the north to Cape Lewin in the south. And people may have heard of the Cape to Cape Walk, which is one of Australia's great walks, and that sort of traverses that ridge and then down to the coast. What you see behind me there is one of our very few coastal settlements. We're very lucky to have a largely undeveloped coastline along here. The area behind me is the settlement of Narrabeen. So Narrabeen and Prete have a combined population of about 600, and people generally come to the region for that sort of wilderness, a natural kind of experience. So yeah, that's it from me. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Matt. What both of you have just shown us just really does highlight the theme for today. They're considering the work from a regional perspective. It's great to see. So we can start now with our first theme for this afternoon's webinar. Our first theme for discussion today is being a regulator in a regional community. So being the regulator. As a person who's almost primarily lived and worked in regional and remote communities, I can attest to the fact that any professional, but particularly someone in a regulatory role, can be challenged by the close relationships that you develop with the people with whom you interact with on a professional basis. But I can also attest to the fact that the benefits that life in regional areas brings to all aspects of our lives, a sense of community and the culture that is about let's work together to make things better. Shelley, you and your team, as you've shown us, regulate a very large and diverse geographic area. Can you share with us what you found to be the challenges and the opportunities that exist when you are a regulator in a regional, or indeed, as you've shown us, in a remote community, please?
Yeah, Marian. I guess I'll commence this topic by saying that from my experience, the opportunities and satisfaction that come with regulating in a region far outweigh any challenges or barriers I've encountered. So I consider our roles of regulators in the region as a privilege and as being the representative of the department you work for. So as you said in my bio, I've actually come into a regional based team from a metro office environment, which allows me to be that voice and conduit to bring awareness and experience from both locations and develop consistent and transparent approaches to regulation by ensuring, business and individuals act in a way that is consistent with legislative and community expectations, whilst considering, the local impacts, constraints, or new and emerging pressures. We recognise that our work can have big impacts on communities and business, and therefore need to make a balanced decision in the interests of the public. So as regulators, we rely on interactions and meaningful engagement, but it is vital that we set clear and manageable expectations and consistency across all our messaging. So I found working in a region has numerous benefits, like having the ability to consider local issues, deliver services directly, mitigate and manage risks at a local level, collaborate with relevant key stakeholders, and build and maintain those relationships that are so important in all aspects of our work, but especially in a regional environment. At times, those stakeholders may even consist of someone that is an acquaintance or we've had a personal relationship, and therefore this disclosure needs to be managed appropriately. So, my fellow panelists and viewers here today may feel differently to my own beliefs that I'm going to touch on next, and I completely respect that. But I personally don't support the saying that we do things different in a region. Of course, there will be occasions when we need to adapt our regulatory approach, our language, compliance tools to suit the situation. But it all needs to be within the bounds of legislation and adherence to, the policies and procedures. So regardless of where we are based with our respective agencies, whether it be a metro, a regional or a remote location, we operate under the same regulatory framework and principles. And I find this approach will support us as contemporary regulators in a regional office with those relationships we've formed in the communities we work in. If we adopt these principles, then our integrity cannot be questioned. We build credibility, we gain respect when we are seen to be professional in our roles and not allow those personal relationships to influence your position at any time. The challenges that we can face in regulating from a region, where we have those relationships within the industry that we regulate, being they may be, an example, an associate at a sporting club or a neighbour, etc. It may heighten the risk of public perception of untoward conduct occurring. We also need to remain vigilant and mindful of regulatory capture, as we do with the opposite end of the spectrum, which could be regulatory discord, where the relationship is distant, confrontational, or non-existent. So we must find that balance somewhere in the middle of the regulatory capture and regulatory discord spectrum, because as we know, a regulator with little or no relationship with industry, like the regulator that is captured, is completely ineffective. So we need to continue to, encourage open communication within our teams to manage any conflicts of interest, to ensure staff are not carrying out any activities that they may put themselves or the department under scrutiny, being a regulator in a regional office. This is where it is important to keep building and strengthening the capacity and capability in our teams to empower succession planning. I, as I'm sure, my fellow panelists do, encourage, innovation, adaptability, and the use of evolving technologies where possible, and the support of our key stakeholders to regulate areas with such geographical landscapes. I hope that's a little bit.
Wonderful insights. Thank you, Shelley. Shelley, could I just ask you about, you made a very good point about not the need to apply the regulations consistently regardless of location, but I think you used the word amend, or I think that was the word you used. Adapt. Could you elaborate on that a little bit more? So what sort of adaptations, not any watering down, absolutely not, but what sort of adaptations have you found you've needed to make in having had that experience both in the metropolitan area and in a regional area?
I think, Marian, it comes back to just setting those clear expectations right from the beginning. So, I would approach a matter that, look, I understand that you may be aware of our industry and you've had regular involvement in our industry, but this is how, we need to ensure that it's regulated. And we're not here to make things difficult. We want to work with you. But at the end of the day, you need to comply with our legislation, and we'll do what we can to support you through that process. So I always come back to manage those expectations right at the outset.
Yep.
And, that open up that engagement, that's communication channels, that we are there to work and support as much as possible, to adapt to, the location or the situation that they may find themselves in, where, there may only be one police officer in the town or something. So we'll always try and work and find the best balance and approach it sensibly. But at the end of the day, bring it back to, this is their expectations. They need to comply with the legislation.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it, that two seemingly discrepant or different areas, so I come from early childhood education and care, you come from liquor and gaming, and yet the premises behind the work are identical. We have the belief that, it sounds very similar to you, that it's imperative that the regulations are applied consistently, because our children in a remote area are just as entitled to the application of those standards as to a child in a metropolitan area. So it's interesting that it's the alignment or the synergies. Matt, did you have anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, working in a town of 8,000 people, it just stands to reason that you're going to know of many of the people that you are engaging with. And I think most people are good enough to understand that, we've got a job to do, and just as they have, and to understand that if you're not able to give them a favourable outcome on something, that's not, personal, it's just, goes with doing our job. But I think possibly the harder thing to work with is when you've got an issue in your community that's quite divisive. And so just as an example of that, the image behind me, and I mentioned before Narrabri, there's been a proposal to do quite some substantial development there, bubbling away for 20 years. And it's really been one of those really divisive issues in our community where you're either for it or against it. And it's something that, you know, comes up in conversation. People want to know, are you in, which camp are you in? And obviously as a regulator, and particularly as a town planner, it's not possible for us to express those whatever personal viewpoints we might have, because ultimately we have a role to play in assessing any development and making a decision on whether it goes ahead or not. So the other thing that Shelley sort of just touched on there that I wanted to say is that this issue of conflict of interest, which is something that we do take really seriously here, but the way that it kind of the way that we deal with it is really quite straightforward, and that is if someone's dealing with something and they have anything more than an acquaintance with the applicant, you simply swap it with someone else so that you're not dealing with that, record that, and then move on. That literally happens, every week. So that's, I think that just deals with that in quite a straightforward way. And the other thing is that we have good relationships with our neighbouring shires. So if there's something quite substantial comes in, or if something, if a really senior person in the organisation has an application that they need dealt with, then we'll simply give that to the neighbouring shire for them to deal with, and they do the same for us. So that's just a really practical way about how we get around sort of working and regulating in a small town.
Yeah, thank you, Matt. It's great to see we've got you might see me glancing over to what's my left, your right. That's where I'm looking at my other screen to look at questions, and it's great to see we've got a couple come in, Shelley. So I'm going to address those to you now. And I encourage other people who are participating to add their questions throughout the webinar. So the first question, I understand that in Cairns, the regulator is located within the same building as the casino. How does this work in practice? Are there any specific challenges in managing in this way?
Look, the gaming inspectorate is within the confines of the Reef Hotel Casino here in Cairns. I'm very confident that we've got, strong measures and controls in place that we have that separation. So, it makes it difficult because we do regulate the casino and we work in an office space within their building. But like I said, we do have those measures in place. If we are seeking information, we do that under respective notices under the legislation to make sure we've got that transparency in place. So if we are seeking footage or whatever, we do meet with the operators monthly to address any issues and any concerns, so they can get that ball rolling. So it's not, something that we have a discussion in the hallway with. We have it very formalized, and this is what our role is. We do let them know this is our expectations, what we have identified. So yeah, I'm very comfortable that with the staff that we've got here, they're all very professional, very skilled, and have been doing their job for a very long time. And we do have that definition and definement that we're the regulators and the casino is who we regulate.
Thank you. And another question, and this person, Darren, thanks us all for our experience. And Shelley, from your experience with casinos and licensed premises, have you seen businesses place business goals at higher importance than compliance with regulations? And adding on to that, have you seen this addressed well?
look, I'm sure there's businesses out there that, you know, at the end of the day, they're trying to run a business and be successful in their business. It's up to us as the regulators to, you know, get on top of that, have that interaction. If we find that they're not complying with our legislation, then we will have to bring them back in and you know, so we're not here to stop or progress any business activities. In fact, we encourage business, but as long as you operate within the confines of the legislation. So yeah, look, without a doubt, I'm sure it happens, but in our compliance programs, and we're out there, we do our inspection activities. We've got our proactive and reactive activities, so we're always out and about, and we will address any matters at the earliest opportunity.
Thank you. Now, I'm just noting our time, so we are going to move on to our second theme, and we do have a few more questions that have been posed. We will aim to come back to those before the end of the webinar, but if not, they, as I said before, they'll be addressed they'll be rolled up and addressed through by the panelists after the webinar. So we'll move on now to our next theme, which is getting the logistics right. Planning and communication. Successfully organising human and physical resources to ensure effective regulatory practice is an important responsibility, one that we as leaders are accountable for. Matt, what approaches have you taken to this part of our work? And can you offer any ideas about how and when we might be able to take proactive rather than reactive approaches to regulatory practice?
Yeah, so something that we've started working to in recent times is what is called a place-based approach, and we're definitely not alone, you know, as a local government in terms of adopting that approach. But the reason why we've done that is that the demographics of our towns and villages across the Shire are so different. So just to give you an idea, 7 kilometres north of me here is a place called Quarama, which is people call Cowtown, but it's actually named after a bird. And the demographics there are, there's about 30% of the population there that are in that sort of 35 to 49-year-old demographic. It's people raising their families. So larger blocks, but still quite a compact settlement, good sports fields, very sport-orientated community. So that's what's going on there. Whereas about 50 kilometres south of me is a place called Augusta, where 60% of the population are over 50. So a lot of people looking to that community to retire in. And so quite obviously, you know, the way that they like to be communicated with, the things that they are looking to us as a local government for are quite different. So quite often, you know, in Quarama, you know, we're talking to people about their sporting needs, new ovals, new facilities, that kind of thing. Whereas in Augusta, it's about making sure that the pathways are wide enough so that they can ride their gophers easily, you know. So that's, you know, I guess the way that the way that we've decided to organise ourselves to meet the diverse needs of our community.
Is to know those communities and to address accordingly, yeah, through a place-based approach. Yeah, we in the Department of Education in Queensland, we use a place-based approach too, and I'd agree with you there. Shelley, do you have any views on that one?
Yeah, I guess the same. Like we take a risk-based approach to all our different areas, and you know, consider all the circumstances around it. So and again, they fall back within our compliance plans and how we capture all those.
Yeah. So when I said about in Queensland, the place-based approach we apply in some aspects of the work, but the risk-based approach is is applied more in the regulatory frame. And do you think that in terms of that, the logistical side of things, emerging technologies, so what we're doing here right now, what we've all had to shift to over the last couple of years, has that changed the way that you do business, Matt, and then Shelley?
Yeah, I mean, we use all of the various communication channels that people would be aware of. I think the thing that we have learned around that is that you need to select the right tool for the job. So just for example, on our Facebook page, the things that get the most likes and shares and that sort of thing are notices about stuff like that road's closed or the pool's reopened or there's a fire there, that kind of short, sharp information. Whereas if you're looking to have a conversation with the community about something on a fairly strategic level, then Facebook is definitely not the place. And I think that whether you are talking to people via or communicating with people via email or via letter or whatever it is, there's still a great role for actually inviting those people in or going to them and having face to face to the extent that it's COVID safe to do so, conversations with community, because I think that shows community that you value what they have to say rather than the kind of conversations that tend to happen on Facebook, which can often be sort of not as informed as what you might get when you seek out the people in the community with the knowledge holders, and actually show them the respect of saying, hey, you know some things that we don't, let's get together and talk about it.
Yeah. Yep. Shelley?
And look, we do a lot of stakeholder engagement meetings. So that's where all the licensees of the licensed premises, you've got police, council, and any other relevant stakeholders will become involved. So we try and attend most of those in our regions, but taking into consideration that some of them are a 4-hour drive away. So adapting to technologies is what we need to start looking at. Instead of jumping in a car and using those resources to go down and sit for an hour meeting, can it be something we do over these forums? And especially since COVID, we've made a lot more use of technology, but we've also got to consider a lot of the remote areas that actually don't have access to your internet and your Wi-Fi, and we do find that a lot, especially across a lot of the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities. So that's where a representative of our office will have to go and have those meetings on the ground. But like Matt said, it is good to have that presence in that location and be able to connect compared to these forums. But we try and adapt where we can and where it is appropriate to use technology to reach out. We also have all our platforms of Facebook and social media platforms to send our key messaging out to licensees and just to the general public for some awareness on OLGR and the activities that we're undertaking. So we use a lot of the social media messaging, but to get into the communities in these remote areas, we still have to actually, consider the lack of technology in the other areas.
Absolutely. And it's been really interesting to hear what you've been saying, because it just demonstrates how complex it is to provide, to consider those logistics, or getting the logistics right, as this theme was titled, is a very difficult thing to do, or a very challenging, I shouldn't say difficult, a very challenging thing to do. And you're absolutely right about, as you were both speaking, I was thinking about we've got age, the engagement of different age groups in different forms of communication. So that is a consideration. The fact, as you quite rightly said, that our people in remote areas often don't have the IT platforms aren't there to be able to have this kind of engagement. Yes, it is really quite complex. I'm going to go to some of the questions because there are some coming in, and I apologise to participants if I don't get yours first, and yours went up a while ago. We will aim to come back to them. Okay, so to what degree, this is Russell, to what degree do you find the ripple effect works in smaller communities? For example, does calling out by whatever means, non-compliance, by one POI have a greater effect on others as compared to larger communities or locations? Now, I'm not familiar with POI. Can somebody let me know, please? Person of
interest?
Influence, interest? Yeah. Okay. Either of you, anyone like to respond to that one?
Yeah, I guess what I could say is that I think it's important to have a culture, so people understand what is acceptable behaviour in your town or in your shire. And I think Margaret River has a very defined kind of character and kind of philosophy. And so, sure, you've got all your rules and regulations and tools that you can use to stop people from doing something or get them to do something that needs to be done. But just as powerful probably is just a collective understanding about what is what's okay within the context of the culture of the place.
Thanks, Matt. Shelley, anything to add?
Look, I think, the ripple effect you can find is actually beneficial, because if you find some non-compliance with a premises, and then word gets around that they've either had total disregard for the legislation and this has been the outcome, you'll see that it does flow across the communities quite quickly. So it allows everyone to then revisit, their trading manner and what they've actually been doing, and reset and go, oh goodness, it's time we have a look at what we're doing. So
yeah, the word on the street, so to speak.
Word on the street, yeah.
Yeah. From the perspective of New Zealand, we don't have a federalised system, so decisions on all policy areas are made by the New Zealand government. How does the regulatory relationship work between Canberra and state capitals where there may be a shared mandate? Who'd like to tackle that one? It's a tricky one. It's a good question. It's a great question. We might have to do that one on notice. Shelley or Matt, did you have any thoughts?
No, I think I'd prefer to do that one on notice, respond. I can have a bit of a think about it and respond.
Matt?
Yes, I mean, speaking to it from a town planning perspective, really the state government sets the direction for local government, and most things that we do have some point at which they need to be kind of signed off at a state government level, and that's something that we need to always remind our community, because at times, we're not really in charge of our own destiny, and they might like to see certain outcomes which just simply, we couldn't get agreement from the state to be able to implement. So, as I say, the town planning system is quite centralised in terms of the state government, but what we're always trying to encourage the state is to allow for nuanced responses to things that are appropriate for local areas, because in a state as large as ours, you know, things are quite obviously going to be different between Broome and Esperance and, you know, everywhere in between. And local governments are always, I think, and especially us, are always asking for a bit of kind of leeway to put in place things that are more appropriate for our community.
So that third theme is around leading a workforce of regional regulators. I'm sure many of you have seen the images that depict a map of Australia overlaid with Europe or the US, which always, I think, serves to remind us, or serves as a timely reminder of what a very large country we live in. As leaders, many of us have teams that are based in offices remote from our base location, and Shelley has spoken about that, and I know that Iain also is in the same position, as am I, as I currently live in Atherton in far north Queensland, as I said, with a Brisbane-based team. And I know that that's by no means unique. This is more and more a trend across all sorts of industries and organisations where people are working in working away from each other, remotely from each other. But it does present that challenge when we're not face to face with our teams about building a positive team culture, of providing capability development that's timely and appropriate. So we were going to be talking, Iain was going to be telling us about his approach to, as Iain has teams across the whole of Western Australia, which is in fact a huge area. Iain was going to be telling us about that. But I wonder whether either Shelley or Matt would like to offer any thoughts about how you manage the team stuff, the leadership of those teams when you aren't face to face, you're not having those hallway conversations, you're not meeting over a cuppa.
Yeah, we are one of the largest employers in our Shire. We've got about 180 employees, and because Margaret River is such a desirable location, you know, we don't struggle to find applicants for positions, but we aren't, and what we find is that many of the people that work in, you know, across a wide range of different disciplines are probably overqualified. They've come from Perth as the capital city or other capital cities, very experienced, but they're coming to probably what is a lower paid role, but they're coming for the lifestyle that we offer here. And we've got to remember to actually honour that, because it's no point asking someone to leave their high-paid job somewhere else and come down for the lifestyle, and then you know, having them sit in here at all hours and you know, not being able to enjoy the kind of natural environment and the sporting opportunities and all the other different lifestyle opportunities that we have down here. So we're quite a family-friendly workplace. You know, it's not unusual to see kids running around. People are coming and going at all hours to manage their family stuff and get that sort of things done. You know, on days when the surf's good, you probably see less people around the office, but they make up the time some time else. So yeah, we've got to remember that it's that people have actually made that choice to accept you know, probably a backward or a sideward step in terms of their career progression, but they're doing that for the lifestyle. And
yeah, so it sounds like an important part of the culture of your organisation is about a very strong respect for the old phrase of the work-life balance, you know, that being able to have a life and to enjoy that life alongside doing whatever your work is. Shelley, have you got anything to add there?
I guess given that I'm only quite new into the regions, I have identified through a few recruitment processes that you obviously don't get the quantity of applicants you would get from a metro office. But in saying that, you still get good quality in applicants that I've seen come come through our Cairns and Rockhampton office. So, I'm quite confident with the abilities of new staff that we have brought in, and we have to recognise that and look at what we can do to support them, either whether they're new to a regulatory environment, and link them all into our teams and different regional offices to get that support. So, we've got an office in Townsville. If we can link into Townsville office and see any new induction programs or whatever that's working for there, let's also bring it up into Cairns or into Rockhampton. In terms of managing remotely, for Rockhampton example, we do have to rely on the Teams and Zoom platforms. And we also do rely on our experienced staff that are in our teams to be there and offer that support and guidance all the way through, just so they're not felt like they're left alone in the regions. We do have great support from our head office environment, so we're always trying to work on that, and recognize that we all are very busy, but we need to look after our staff in our regions and make sure that if there's development needs or new opportunities, we put that forward and try and encourage that.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? I've managed teams remotely for nearly 8 years in various iterations, and in that time, the way that we operate now, such as we are in this instance, or examples of, I feel that does make it a lot more doable in a positive way. And it's not negating the value of a face-to-face conversation by any means, but we found in our department that when COVID, 2 years ago, COVID first hit, we found that we became very mindful with our remote, much more mindful than we probably had been. So whilst we did have measures in place to maintain good communication, etc. at that time, when we really had to go, okay, we're going to be doing this for a while, we need to think about it. And we were the leadership team, we got some feedback from our team saying, hey, we feel a lot more connected than we ever have, and yet many of us are working even more remotely or away from each other, given that many people were working from home, because we'd taken a mindful approach to it.
So I have not long been a part of WorkSafe here in Western Australia, and one of the things that I've inherited is a number of regional offices, and managing and leading a regional diverse workforce has come with some of its own challenges. I don't dispute for one moment that the people that work in those offices, they are absolutely passionate and enthusiastic about their role. But one of the issues I've really come across is maintaining a consistent level in that regulatory approach. You may have already mentioned about, one of the issues we have is that as a regional regulator, you live and work in the community in which we're trying to regulate. And then there's an absolute line between being somebody's next door neighbour, friend, somebody that you see on the school run, somebody that you see at the shops, and then, being the regulator. So that consistent approach has been something that I've had to tackle.
Yep.
And almost some of the officers almost get a culture of their own, and it's very difficult. Sometimes they feel that you're big brother coming up from Perth to tell them how to do their business, and that's not a case at all. But it's how do we have a consistent message when we're trying to communicate perhaps 1,500 kilometres across. So it's very much about one of the ways we've dealt with that is actually about building the capability of those staff and bringing them back to the centre of our business, which is in Perth, and helping with continuation training, updating. Because again, one of the things that the regional teams have found is that they're very isolated. They do sometimes feel it's a little bit us and them. So again, it's not only changing their culture, but it's changing our culture as well to make sure that they feel part of the business that they're in, and they feel listened to and they feel heard. I don't know how much of that you may have covered previously as part of this webinar, but there's certainly things that we're working on at the moment to improve the level of regulation.
They're great insights, Iain, and I love the comment that you made about both parties, or not parties, both groups considering what we can do to, it's not meet in the middle, but just how we can reflect on our practice, both centrally or in the head office, whatever your main group are called, and those in the regions. That's a really insightful comment. But we hadn't covered a lot of that, Iain, so thank you. That's great. Shelley and Matt, anything to add to that?
Look, I think one of the challenges that you would find in a regional office is compared to a metro environment where you do have quite a lot of new staff coming in. With that new staff, they bring new skills, and so it shares across the workforce in that head office environment. In a regional environment, you could have the same office of staff for a significant amount of time, so they're just not exposed to new opportunities, new contemporary ideas, or investigation techniques, or something that you've seen, and it's building capability within a head office because they're exposed to that, where in a regional environment, not so much. So we need to look at, as leaders, how we can then build that capability across, bring those measures that are being picked up from just new ideas coming through and feeding it into our regional offices. So we also, not left behind, and can remain contemporary and modern and learn all these new skills that we may not be aware of because we're not exposed to new people all the time.
Yeah, two-way street, absolutely. That's great. Thank you. We are running out of time very quickly, and I'd like to apologise to the people, the participants. We've got a number of questions up there, and I'm sure we'll be able to get to those through the participants the panellists. I apologise for responding later. I would like to pose one last question. I'll see if Iain can respond first. With the gift of hindsight and your experience in working in regional areas, Iain, is there something that you wish you knew when you started on this journey?
Yeah, I suppose there is. There are always things that we can learn. The one thing that I wish I'd known a little bit more is actually about some of the industries that I regulate. I think I'm quite a good regulator, but I would like to know a little bit more about the industries that I regulate. And one of the ways I've taken that is to actually do more carrot than stick. So do more visits to farms, to units that are remotely located, and I come at it more from an education and information point of view for them and for us. So if I can learn something more about their business by going, and they can learn something more about how the regulator is looking to have things done. So that's one of the things that I would like to have known. Otherwise, it's been a pretty steep learning curve when I am confronted with a farmer that has got lots of things to do, and I'm just one of the problems that's turned up on his doorstep. Sure.
Yes. I think we would all be nodding, Shelley and Matt, too, about that one. I will have to leave that, Shelley and Matt. I'm sorry, because we need to wrap up. The time has absolutely flown. I was told that this would happen, and I'm very shocked at how correct whoever it was from NRCoP said the time will fly, and it certainly has.